Dr. Richardson, I believe we're ready.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Good to see everyone. I know mostly everyone who is going to be serving on the PCRB review board. And what I wanted to do just before we get started was to basically do an introduction of who you are and to talk a little bit about yourself, and we'll move into the rest of the body of the agenda. As we have on our agenda, we do have the following items that we want to discuss, and it's basically the FOIA overview, which our city attorney will be providing that, as well as the election of officers. And then we also want to review the PCRB Executive Director job description, which I know that everyone received a draft copy. We can talk a little bit more about that, and we can go into that and then talk about a little bit more how we developed it and then how we plan to move forward. And then the last item is other business, which is talking about our next meeting, but we'll also have to add prior to that is to talk a little bit more about our scheduled meeting date. That's something that we have to do on an annual basis. As you look at the bylaws, you will see that. So we can establish that today and let everyone know when we're planning to meet, so everyone can, so we can make sure that everyone has the time as well as the dates that we will be meeting moving forward. So with that said, I'll go ahead and we can do our introductions. I do have a couple of people on here, especially our HR director, to talk about the position later on. And we do have no other than Brian Wheeler, as you saw, as well as Max Robinson, who serves as our deputy clerk. So we will go through that and just start with introductions. And I'm gonna start to my right, as this looks like Hollywood Squares to me. So I'm gonna start to my right, and Ms. Carpenter, would you be the first to do a quick intro?
Oh, great. You start with me. Before I start, Wheeler, I have a message from Ms. Gilmore that she needs the call-in information. So I don't know if she doesn't have that in her email. Could you send that to her?
I will, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Nancy Carpenter. I have been a city resident since about 2015, 16, a Virginia resident all my life. Prior lived in Albemarle County for a few years, and before that in Culpeper. I'm engaged with helping marginalized communities retain housing and stay stably housed throughout the greater continuum of care is what I do. And this work is very important to me because now, with a lot that has been going on over the last 2 years since the initial board was paneled, that there is a need more than ever for this type of community civilian commission. And I'm very grateful to be appointed to serve on this board. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dorinda Johnson.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dorinda. Everybody calls me Rennie. I was born and raised in Charlottesville. So, excuse me, I've been here. It'll be 61 years next weekend. I'll be 61. I had the opportunity to serve on the Human Rights Task Force and then as a commissioner on the Human Rights Commission. So I've been involved in this for quite some time, thanks to my pastor, Reverend Bates. He got me involved in all of this several years ago. I'm looking forward to this, and I think I'm very thankful for the invitation of being on the board. I'm so interested and have such a strong passion for it, A, because I have 2 sons that are young African-American sons, and B, with all that is going on across the nation, I see that there is a dire need for this to be in place. So I am very hopeful and that we will be making a difference once we get this up and going. And again, I thank you.
Great, thank you. I was muted. Stuart Evans.
Hi, my name is Stuart Evans. I work at the University of Virginia's Equal Opportunity and Civil Rights Office. I've been in Charlottesville for about 2 years, and I'm a Title IX investigator at the office. So I don't know if there's much more. I think we probably all share similar goals, as Rennie was saying. I guess I do want to make sure, I know that you went through the agenda, Dr. Richardson, but I want to make sure that we set aside time for some other business that didn't make the agenda, as well as public comment period, because I know that's required by the bylaws in each regular meeting. So beyond that, I don't know, I guess that sort of sums up me and the PCRB.
Okay, thanks. Mr. James Watson.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is James Watson. I want to start out by saying thank you to the City Council for selecting me to be a part of this board. I also want to thank the folks who worked really hard last year to create the bylaws and all the blood, sweat, and tears that they went through to get us to this point. I'm a 25-year resident of Charlottesville. I've got a daughter at CHS. I've got 2 sons who are at Greenbrier. I absolutely love the city of Charlottesville. It's been a fantastic place for me to live. I attended the University of Virginia. I got my bachelor's degree there and my master's in urban and environmental planning. So I've been wanting to meet up with the city manager sometime and sit down and chat with him. We've seen each other in passing, but he's usually pretty busy, but I'd definitely like to connect with you someday. So I've got a lot of passion for Charlottesville. I love the city. I've got 2 brown sons that are growing up in this world. I'm obviously an African-American male. I think that in Charlottesville, the potential to change the narrative is limitless. I think that there's a lot of potential to change the narrative. I think we're small. I think at this moment in time, the number 2 issue in the news is, the number 1 is the coronavirus right now. The number 2 issue is, police brutality, police fairness, equity, justice. And I think this is a great time to be coming together and trying to execute change. And I'm here to offer solutions. One of the things that I think is going to be key is if we're able to work together with the police department, not just us versus they, but also develop a program that will allow us to maximize on the young talent that we have throughout the city in Fifeville, in Belmont, in the Friendship Court community. I think we can begin, today's 2020, and I think by the year 2025, if we start working with kids who are at Walker and Buford, by 2025, we could create a pipeline of kids coming out of high school that are going to the police academy as an opportunity. And I think we have a lot of resources here in this community. We've got a criminal justice program at Piedmont. We've got a law school at UVA. So maybe over the next 5 years and in the next 10 years, we start producing young talented kids and exposing them to these opportunities that could help change this narrative, because we would have a more diverse population of police, of judges, of lawyers, and civil servants in our city. So I'll go on and on. I can go on and on rather, but I'll stop right there and I just let you guys know I'm really excited to work together and make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Did Ms. Deidre Gilmore, was she able to get on, Brian?
I did send her a fresh invitation, but I've not seen her join yet.
Okay, and I know that Chief Brackney will be joining us later, my understanding. Mr. William Mendez.
Can you hear me now on the phone?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Okay. For one thing, it's definitely Bill, or
Okay.
AU, or whatever word you want. I moved to Charlottesville about 3 years ago after living in Northern Virginia for 30 years. That was circa August 2017, and that kind of catalyzed my interest in social justice looking for something to do in this community. I started attending the interim board meetings when I heard that they were drafting statute and bylaws. And when the data portal was put up by Chief Brackney and the information about frequency of police encounters became available, I started doing some data analysis. That's my thing. My career has been in public health and environmental statistics, but it's really, how do you explain when bad things happen to people, and how do you explain when more bad things happen to different groups of people? And those are the kinds of issues that I've spent most of my career working on, and I think I see myself as a data guy, and I hope my skills will be useful to the board moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mendez. We're going to move on to Mr. Philip C.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Philip. Can everybody hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right, great. Okay, moved back here in 1999. I attended Virginia, both grad and undergrad, and then came back for a postgraduate degree. I've been a city employee since 99, first in the school systems at Beaufort as a teacher and administrator, and then as executive director of the First Tee, and now with Parks and Rec as a aquatics facilities manager. Had 6 years, a little over 6 years law enforcement experience as a crime scene tech, firearms instructor, criminal investigator. I have to say that when I was in law enforcement, we lived in the communities that which you grew up in. So it was much more civil. It was much more of a partnership with the community and your neighbor. You knew your neighbors, everyone knew you. I did learn not everybody needs a ticket and not everybody needs to go to jail. So there is a curve there with folks. I want to echo what James said. Again, thank you for this appointment and the previous work of the folks that have gotten us this far. And finally, unfortunately, I lost my brother a couple of months ago, but I was his guardian. And being the guardian of a mentally and physically challenged individual in this country is tough. And so a lot of my experience in fighting for his civil rights within the courts and within the system, I feel like that, and being in this community for a number of years and seeing a lot of the discrepancies and injustices, that we can make this better, and I can bring that to the table. And as I said, as we all, I feel like want to be a part of the solution and not make the problem worse. So thank you all, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Mr. C. I do see that we have Mayor Walker with us too. And
yeah, I'll come back. I'm checking with Ms. Gilmore now to see if she's what issue she's having with getting on.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for the brief introductions, and we'll keep on moving down the agenda. I'm going to turn it over at this moment to John Blair, our city attorney, and he'll go over the FOIA overview.
Thank you, Dr. Richardson, and I'd like to thank everyone who has joined the board, and want to give you a brief overview of the Freedom of Information Act. I believe that the clerk's office all did provide you with a copy of the act, which is required pursuant to state law, and you also are required to familiarize yourself with the act. And hopefully this brief introduction to FOIA can help you do that. I typically split up FOIA into two separate components of the law. The first component that I like to focus on with any new board or commission is meetings. And probably the most important aspect of meetings that you need to know is that if more than two of you gather and you discuss police CRB business, that constitutes a meeting under FOIA. Why is that important? Well, that's important because meetings pursuant to FOIA have to be noticed to the public. And there needs to be at least 3 business days provided before there is a meeting. And the purpose of that notice requirement is so that the public has a right to listen to and observe the proceedings of any public body. But I want to go into a couple of things that are fairly regular questions that I get advising boards and commissions. And one of them is, let's say that, and I'll just use the Brady Bunch screen, Ms. Carpenter, Ms. Johnson, and Mr. Mendez, you all are out at a park in Charlottesville and you bump into each other. Is that a meeting under FOIA? Well, just meeting each other, the answer is no. What actually constitutes a meeting under FOIA is if you were to discuss police CRB business. So again, we've all had the experience. We bump into folks we know around town. And again, this is what I hope this can do is maybe allay some concerns that you might have. You know, you're at a park, you see 2 fellow CRB members. That's not a meeting so long as you don't discuss CRB business or anything related to the CRB. However, I would also advise clients that even though it may not be a meeting under FOIA, typically it's best if you see a couple of other folks and yourself to say hello, but to quickly sort of say, you know, obviously we're all on the CRB. How about one of us exits here? Because even though you haven't violated a law, if you don't discuss CRB business, obviously members of the public can see 3 members of this group, the Planning Commission, the Board of Architectural Review, anytime that 3 members of a body are seen together, and people can imply that there's some sort of secret meeting that's occurring. So again, the rule of 3 applies to all public bodies in Virginia. Another aspect of meetings that I think it's important to know pursuant to FOIA is that when you as a board want to have a meeting, I mentioned the notice requirement. You will have your regular meetings, which hopefully at this inaugural meeting, you'll establish a regular meeting schedule. But there may be times that you say, well, we have some business that we need to attend to that we can't wait until the regular meeting. That would be a special meeting. And if it's possible, and usually it is, you need to call Ms. Robinson or Ms. Thomas in the clerk's office and say, hi, we need, you know, your chair will call and say, we need to schedule a special meeting of the CRB. We need to get the notice out. And that office will, and notice is we have to place it on the city's website. We also have to place it outside of the clerk's office and outside of the, a physical notice outside of the clerk's office and outside of the Department of Neighborhood Development Services that lists the time, place, and date of the meeting. So that's important to know that, you know, if outside of your regular meeting, you want to have another meeting, that you need to make sure that the clerk's office is aware so they can get the proper notice out to the public. The second component of FOIA that I think is, I go over with boards and commissions is public records. And what is a public record and why is that important? Well, a public record isn't just a piece of paper any longer. It includes emails, text messages, any sort of electronic message, in addition to any paper that you may have that details any work you do on behalf of the CRB. The legal term is transact public business. So if you send an email to another individual or an email to a fellow CRB member and it's discussing CRB business, that is what in the parlance is called FOIAble. Obviously, that is important to know because you need to understand at this point, and since you've been appointed, anything that you've written down about the CRB can potentially be subject to a FOIA request. So how does that happen? Well, if you are a Virginia citizen or you're a media publication that falls within the strictures of the Freedom of Information Act, you can submit what's called a FOIA request. Now, typically, people do this through our FOIA officer. Mr. Wheeler is on the line, and there's a FOIA email address, and people will type out an email that would say, I'd like all the public records of Ms. Smith on whichever board and commission from this date to this date discussing this project. And Mr. Wheeler's office will get that. He will then immediately contact the members of your body if the FOIA request is directed to you, and he will state, we need these records. There's been a FOIA request for them. Concerning these records requests, it's also important for you to understand as a CRB member, FOIA requests don't have to be in writing, and FOIA requests can be made directly to you. You know, I know at the last council meeting on June the 15th of this year, there was an oral Freedom of Information Act records request during the public comment period. But in your role as a CRB member, if I came up to Mr. Watson and I said, hi, Mr. Watson, I'd like to request all of your Police Civilian Review Board emails for the past 2 weeks. That is a FOIA request, even though it's not in writing. It doesn't have to be. And my advice to you as members of the CRB is if you get such an oral request, you should, as soon as you're possible, write down the request, who the requester was, and immediately contact Mr. Wheeler so that the communications office can start to process the FOIA request. Communications office is here. They do all of the city's FOIA work for boards and commissions, as well as the city council. And they're here to help you as well on any FOIA requests that are received, to process those and to provide the responsive documents. It's very important, I will say this, to understand that this topic has become politicized, and certainly, you know, I'm not here in any partisan capacity, never have been, never will be, but there is an issue that has popped up repeatedly in the last 5 to 10 years about personal email and your personal email address. And again, I'm sure you're all aware, we've seen various permutations of this argument from various people and various high-profile public officials about, well, I was using my Gmail account, or I was using a Yahoo account. And it's important to know that that doesn't really matter. If you're conducting PCRB business on your Gmail account and somebody asked for those records, the records that relate to the transaction of public business have to be provided, even if you used a private email account like Gmail or Yahoo. That's sort of an emerging issue, but it's really beyond emerging at this point. It's become just a major issue in general, not just in Virginia, but in almost every state, about personal email accounts and whether they are subject to FOIA or not. So, talking about public records, another thing to familiarize yourself is that there are retention schedules. The Library of Virginia puts out retention schedules for all public body records. The most important one to familiarize yourself, and I will contact Mr. Wheeler or Ms. Thomas, and they can get this out to you, is obviously email correspondence. How long do you need to keep your email correspondence from your work on the PCRB? There are different answers to that question depending on what the email may address. Typical answer is 3 years, but there are other aspects of the retention schedule that might be different than 3 years. So I will have that provided to you, but it is important that you retain all of your emails and public records related to your service on the PCRB. The part that I do need to inform you, though I don't think FOIA should ever be seen as sort of something that's scary, but people hear this and sometimes they get scared, but I always say, don't be scared because we have to go over penalties when we're familiarizing you with FOIA. But if anyone makes an intentional and willful violation of FOIA, the law states that they're subject to a fine of between, I believe, $500 and I believe $2,500. It's either $2,000 or $2,500 for the first offense, and then higher penalties for a second offense. And also a judge will order whoever the offender is to turn over the records that have been requested. It's something called a writ of mandamus. So it is important to follow FOIA. I know all of you will, but I also do have to, as part of this training, provide you that there are penalties if you don't comply with FOIA that include fines in your individual capacity, as well as the possibility of a court order mandating that you turn over records. I wanted to make this very basic to begin with. It can be very boring. I acknowledge that, but wanted to give you the basics. So again, that you can familiarize yourself with FOIA, and happy to take any questions you may have.
I've had a volunteer organization ask me if they could assist in doing data analysis on public information released by the police department. So as I understand it, what that means is that if I were to communicate with them, that would be FOIA-able, but their independent analyses would not be.
That would be correct. If they're just doing it independent and they're a nonprofit, they're not subject to FOIAs. They're not members of the public body. But as you stated, if you request them, then the records related to your request are FOIA.
Thanks.
Any other questions pertaining to the FOIA overview?
Yeah, I got a question.
Okay, Mr. Watson.
Do we receive city email accounts to just keep things separated, or are we pretty much going to rely on our own personal accounts as board members? Were you guys able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
That's a question for Dr. Richardson, but my advice would be you should receive a separate city email account so that you can keep all of your public business separate from your private account.
The other question I was going to ask too is there just a good cheat sheet reference on all things FOIA that we can refer to?
I can look for something like that. I've done training. My office has done some training. I'll look for something like that that I hope might be helpful.
Any other questions? If not, we're going to move on to the next item for the election of officers. Mr. Blair.
Sure.
Hold on for just a second. Mr. Wheeler, were you able to get in contact with Ms. Gilmore?
Mayor Walker, I did speak to Ms. Gilmore and she is trying to dial in via telephone right now.
Okay. All right, so if we could just give her just time for her to join.
Would you all
Do we-
maybe take a 5-minute recess? Is that okay with everybody?
I see her now, Mr. Blair.
Okay,
Ms. Gilmore, can you hear us? Go ahead and speak.
Yes.
Great, we have her on the call now.
Yay, good deal.
Okay, how you doing, Ms. Gilmore? This is Teron Richardson.
Fine. How you doing?
Doing great. We just went over the FOIA overview, but what we also did in the beginning, we talked about, well, each member gave an intro of themselves. So I will allow you that opportunity to be able to do that, and then we'll continue into our agenda. And we can give you an overview, follow this meeting about what we discussed about FOIA.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Deirdre Gilmore.
Hello.
I'm
Hey, Dee Dee.
Hey,
how y'all doing?
Good. How are you?
we are good.
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 all right. Well, welcome, ma'am. And you've called in right at the time that we're going to go over the election of officers for the CRB. And per the bylaws at this meeting, there's an election of a chairperson and a vice chairperson. Typically, the way we handle this at the very first meeting of a board or commission is we'll take nominations. Once the nominations are complete, then there will be a roll call vote of each individual, and they will state their selection for chair. And then they will follow that process for the vice chair as well. And then at that point, I'll turn the meeting back over to Dr. Richardson, and he and the chair can manage the rest of the meeting and add the public comment portion and also other items that the CRB would like to discuss today.
Mr. Blair, I believe the group will also need a secretary.
Yeah, they will. They
Okay.
will.
I thought the vice chair took notes.
The vice chair.
Yeah,
Well,
well, not sure we have a secretary.
No, there's no secretary in the bylaws.
okay. All right. So let me start with, are there any nominations for chair of the CRB?
I'd like to make a nomination that we nominate Mr. James Watson to be the chair of the CRB.
I
Second.
second that. I second that.
Okay. Are there any other nominations for chair? All right, can I have a motion to close the nominations?
I'll make that motion.
So move.
Okay,
I'd have to say that's awfully kind of you. I figured we were all going to meet. Figured we were going to meet a couple of times, and then we'd vote on all of that stuff. But I'm honored.
okay.
Thank you.
And let's make it official. There are no further nominations from the floor. Ms. Robinson, can you please call the roll and have each member state their choice for the PCRB chair?
Sure. Ms. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore, I'm sorry, Ms. Gilmore,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Mendez,
Yes,
Mr. C,
Yes.
and Mr. Watson.
Yes. Thank you.
And now I'll open the floor to nominations for the vice chair.
Stuart Evans.
All right. Is there a second?
I would
I second.
say, oh,
I'll second that nomination.
Are there any additional nominations for vice chair? All right. I think then the nominations may be closed. Mr. Evans is the only nominee for vice chair. Ms. Robinson, can you call the roll and have each individual state their choice for vice chair?
Ms. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
I think I should recuse myself.
is that appropriate, Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Gilmore,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Mendez,
Yes.
Mr. C,
Yes.
I'm sorry, is Mr. C a voting
Mr. C
member or
is
not?
not a voting
No,
member.
not a voting
No,
member.
Mr. C is not a voting member.
Thank you.
okay. And Mr. Watson.
yes.
All right. Congratulations to Mr. Watson and Mr. Evans, and I will turn this over to you, Dr. Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Blair.
Excuse me, may I address the chairman for just a hot second? I just wanted to acknowledge what Mr. Evans said, that I'd like to see a public comment period at the end of this particular meeting, and also a conversation on under other business as far as the initial bylaws versus the bylaws adopted in November of 2019. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next agenda item. Mr. Chair, I want to move on to looking at the review of the PCRB Executive Director job description.
Yeah, I've looked at it. You know what? I don't know if I have it right in front of me. Didn't know what you have in mind right now. Are we reviewing the job description and details and all that good stuff?
That's the point right here. Yes, you're correct. But what I had is basically the draft, and I just wanted to let everyone know that the only two changes that I saw that needed to be was in the second line under general summary. It says for the providing, we'll take out the, and then if you go to the very last section, which is physical conditions and work contacts, we are going to take out that entire section that talks about the majority of time spent in this position. We're going to take that out and add some different language because it is an office position. And we will.
If I could just add for a quick second, we wanted to just make sure that you all approved of the job description.
Well, I was going to get to that.
Okay.
I was going to get to that. I just was trying to let everyone know that these were some of the modifications that I made, and then from that point, just going on and saying, basically what I had in the draft. Do you approve of that?
I made some pretty detailed comments, and I would like to share them with you or with the HR director. We can discuss them in detail now, but I think more to the point, I think the board needs a bit more time, and that this is a very important decision. We should be able to, pool our comments and get them back to you.
That's fine. What I wanted to do, Mr. Mendez, what I wanted to do, Mr. Mendez, is basically just provide you with the draft so you have something to work with. And that's why I wanted to provide it to you. And then that was the ultimate goal for you to come back. I didn't want you to make a decision today. I just wanted you to have it. And then we'll come back and be able to further discuss it.
So yeah, so Mr. Chairman, I guess, do you want to be the focal point for our comments? I can send you what I have, and I'm sure there are others who also have comments.
Is that okay, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, could you repeat that again, sir? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. I guess I'm thinking that we probably all need to weigh in on this, on the job description, and I think someone needs to sort of integrate our comments. Would you like to do that, or I could volunteer to do that, or however?
Yeah, I concur that we should consolidate and maybe go back through and take a look at the job description. Because like yourself, I wasn't expecting to be chair, nor was I expecting right now to be concurring or non-concurring on the job description. But yes, if we all have a little bit more time to go back, and then if you want to put your hand up as you just did to collect everybody's input, that would be excellent. Yes, sir.
And okay. All right. So I just want to make sure that the point person will be Mr. Mendez, who I work directly with, who will receive all of your comments so that we can get it together and then be able to have it ready to get out to be able to do an announcement for your executive director.
Yeah, I concur with that. Do we have a deadline currently for that? Or do we need a little bit of?
Well, that's all dependent.
Okay.
Someone's going to say something. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think y'all can set the deadline for that. Sending the information out with the packets was so that there wouldn't be any further delays in getting that job description posted, and so that process could start. So at this point, it's just whatever the CRB is comfortable with. We just asked the staff to make sure that you all had it, so that those edits could be made as quickly as possible so that we could post it.
I would suggest that we have Bill collect suggested edits from whether it's from the city or from members, and then we can put it on the agenda for our first meeting or the next meeting. I guess this is the first one, and then we can theoretically finalize or vote on it then.
So I think if you all would submit the edits to Dr. Richardson so that Dr. Richardson and Ms. Vineyard can take a look at them and give you all any responses based on those edits, so that by the time the next meeting occurred, you all they could be ready to vote on.
I mean,
So
go ahead.
I was going to say, if people get them to me this week, I can integrate them quite quickly and forward them on. If people need more time, just let me know.
I do have a question. Can you concurrently, when you send it to the CRB board, will it be on the city's website so that the public will be able to review the requirements and criteria and skills and everything that'll be on that job description?
Now you're asking for the one that the CRB does once we get all the information back from Mr. Mendez. Yes, we can do that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to compliment you, by the way. That's a good salary range. I was afraid it was going to be insufficient. I think that's very good.
Welcome. All right, so we have that directive. So moving on, Mr. Blair, to move into the next section in terms of adding to the agenda. We need to amend the agenda.
Well, a couple of things. The bylaws do state the chair, Mr. Watson, for regular meetings, you would establish a time period to receive, it says a reasonable time period to receive public comments. You know, we've kind of reached the end of the business portion in terms of what the staff had needed to get out of the way. But at this point, you would need to establish the time and ask for public comments. Mr. Wheeler does this through the webinar. You can set, if you want to say 30 minutes or an hour, or however long you would like, or just until they're done. Typically it's 3 minutes apiece at city council meetings is the time period given to each individual. But again, this is your board. So that's sort of something you'll need to discuss with your board members about how long and in total, and also what time period you'd like to give each speaker during this meeting for public comment. It also, the bylaws do state, and this is the portion where I would advise that you all establish your regular meeting schedule. What date, what time you all want to meet on a regular basis in the coming months. And I know Ms. Carpenter had stated that she would like to have discussion of the bylaws. I think at this point, I think the other two items I should say are more organizational, right? They're not necessarily something you have to amend the agenda, because your bylaws provide that you'll establish a regular meeting schedule and have public comment. But Ms. Carpenter wanted to, I think, amend to have a substantive discussion on perhaps looking at amending the bylaws. So I think, Mr. Chair, if you'd be willing to entertain a motion to amend your agenda to have a discussion of the bylaws.
I mean, I think that sounds right to me, but we also, as a board, never adopted the agenda either and voted on that. So I don't want to play, I don't want to have rules for some things and not for others.
Sure. Well, this was more an organizational meeting at this point, but at this point that's over, and I would, if you'd like, you can adopt and have a motion to adopt an amended agenda. Maybe if Ms. Carpenter would like to state she'd like to have that discussion and then adopt an amended agenda.
Yes, I'll make a motion that we have a discussion to amend the agenda to include under other business, a discussion on the initial bylaws versus the current set that we have right now that were adopted by City Council in 2019.
I'll second that motion.
I concur. I'm getting used to the flow here, though. I've seen when new city councilors get on and they're trying to figure out, what's normal, and that's the space I'm in. I see the police chief down there. Hello, chief. You're below me on my screen. Brady Bunch thing going on here.
Do we need to have a vote on the motion?
I was going to say, now that there's a motion and a second, Mr. Chair, would you like to call to adopt the amended agenda? Call for a vote.
Yes. So we're going to go around the horn.
Yes, I'd have Ms. Robinson call the roll.
Okay.
And one question, Mr. Blair, should I include Mr. C in this or no?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Ms. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Gilmore?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
So do we enter into, we're into the discussion phase for the initial CRB bylaws. And I'm in favor of adopting them right now. We've had 2 years just about of intense hard work by a lot of folks in the community, some that are here on the webinar and some that are probably listening. And it was given to us the purview to decide which version of the bylaws we wanted to operate under. And I think that the community spoke through the initial board by saying they wanted a very strong CRB. They wanted one that could really try to start the transformative process, even more so now than the events of 2017 and 2018 contributed to. So that's where I'm at with the beginning discussion on this particular issue.
I agree with Nancy. I think that the initial bylaws proposed by the initial CRB reflect a lot of hard work, a lot of careful consideration, were drafted over time and not quickly, and give the board more independence and more power to work with the executive director as opposed to for the executive director. I think it gives the board access to more data that will be useful for us making decisions. It requires more interaction with the police department, and rather than just making a suggestion. And I think that overall, it's a better set and a more complete set of bylaws rather than, I guess, a more piecemeal approach.
And I want to third it because I too had taken into consideration the long and hard work that those folks had did on this. And I was a tad bit confused on why there had to be another set that had to be adopted when they had did such a great job on there. So I would like to see the original bylaws.
And I just want to clarify that I'm talking about the bylaws and the ordinance, not just the bylaws. So the packet that was submitted by the initial PCRB, not just the bylaws, but the whole thing together, because they are integrated and need to be adopted together, not singularly.
Well, we have the power to adopt the bylaws. That would require the council to go back and change the statute, correct?
No,
Well,
No.
it will be up to my understanding is that it will be up to the city council whether or not to approve. It will be, if we vote in favor of it, it will be before the city council at their next meeting, correct, Mr. Blair?
what are you're talking about the bylaws and the ordinance? Well, let's go over that. In terms of your bylaws, if
I just make the motion right now, and then we can go into discussion that this CRB requests that city council immediately revert to the initial CRB's proposed ordinance and bylaws as submitted to council by the PCRB. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay.
Okay.
And so your motion, and Ms. Carpenter, is to send these to the city council and ask that they amend both the ordinance and the bylaws at this time.
Yes.
Okay. What I would advise, if you take a look at Article 13 of your bylaws, as well as Section 2-464 of the Police Civilian Review Board bylaws, they state the bylaws may be amended by the board. Any proposed amendment must be presented by a board member in writing at a regular board member. The board may adopt the amendment at its next regular meeting upon an affirmative vote of 4 board members. And so what I would advise is, because you're talking about both the bylaws and the ordinance, I would advise that we can, if the PCRB members are comfortable now, as you are probably all aware of the written documentation of the initial CRB, you could accept that at this meeting they've been presented, the initial CRB bylaws and ordinance, and then at your next meeting, you would need to vote on those to send them to council.
Thank you, Mr. Blair, for that explanation, but I think my motion still stands as it is. For the bylaws and the ordinance.
Concur with Ms. Carpenter.
And so do I.
Okay. I think that it's important to have the initial bylaws and ordinance adopted for this board and for the city to work under. We are still a bellwether community in the nation, whether we believe that or not. And a lot of what we do is considered by other communities who are struggling with the things that we are struggling with. And I think that if we come with a strong ordinance and a strong commission, we are starting that process.
Mr. Blair, one quick question. Was the bylaw reference, I'm trying to look through both documents, but was that in both the initial and the approved bylaws?
Yeah.
About the
policy that would be presented at this meeting and voted on. Was it just in our amended version or was it in both?
let me, if you have a minute, let me take a look at that.
I guess I would ultimately say that I see what, that's all we want. And I guess worst, in my opinion, worst case scenarios, we could set our first regular meeting for next week and then vote on it next week then, right? I mean, if we have to follow the bylaws to the letter right now, if that's what that's what the attorney's saying.
That's one of the discussions that we would have next. One of the items that we talk about other business in terms of Article 5C, quorum voting meetings, minutes and ethics, to talk about establishing the meeting schedule for the year.
I hate to be a stickler, but we do have a motion on the floor. And I guess that needs to somehow go away or be resolved some way. And personally, I believe that we can wait to the next meeting myself.
Well, I mean, I do have my motion on the floor and we are discussing it, but we haven't had a vote on the motion yet, I don't think.
No, ma'am.
Thank you.
Nancy, can you restate just to make sure we're all on the same page? So that everybody knows that we're voting for what we're voting for.
We're voting for
just because we've had a lot of, conversation and bouncing around here a little bit.
the motion that I made was to adopt the initial bylaws and ordinance that the initial PRCB came up with, and to do that and revert to those immediately.
Well, another suggestion, and I guess I'm just curious as about the effect if, for instance, a board, not just this board, votes and it does, I mean, if it doesn't comport with their bylaws. That would be a question for Mr. Blair. But one thing I'm also interested in is we could vote now in favor, or we could, however people want to vote in favor of Ms. Carpenter's motion. And then we could also vote at the next meeting to belts and suspenders and make sure that we follow both, just to do it twice so that there can be no argument that we didn't follow the letter of the bylaw.
Do it twice. Never heard of that. Well, I'm going to call the vote.
And Mr. Evans, to address your question, if the bylaws ultimately, if the bylaws state that, and again, this somebody could ultimately try to challenge it, because if your bylaws say that they may only be amended in one manner, then you have to follow those bylaws, or the vote could be voided if challenged in court.
Okay. Well, should we, like Nancy asked?
Yeah, I called for the vote.
Chairman Watson.
Okay, so let's go around the room, the virtual room, and start with Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
So we got one yay. Okay, Mr. Philip CA.
He's non-voting.
Not a voter.
Oh, I'm sorry. Stuart.
Yay.
Okay, Mr. Wayne Menendez, looks like you're on mute.
I'm on the phone. Reluctantly, yes.
Okay. Ms. Thomas? I think she might be on mute.
She's not voting.
She's
Okay.
not a member.
I'm sorry if I'm getting a little
council.
confused here. And then I've got a few phone numbers on here right now too. I don't have.
Yeah, one of them's me. One of them's Mendez.
And Ms.
Okay.
Gilmore.
I've got your photo and I've got your number between the two of these.
Yeah.
Okay, who did I miss?
Ms. Gilmore.
Ms. Gilmore.
Miss Gilmore. Can you hear us?
Well, I want to better understand what Nancy Carpenter is talking about. So you want to keep the old bylaws, Ms. Carpenter? That's what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am. I want to revert immediately back to the bylaws and the ordinance that was produced by the initial PCRB over 18 months of hard work and labor.
Okay. I feel you, because I'm sitting here reading over, and I've heard people complaining about the new bylaws being watered down. So I don't think I want to better understand. I want to read through this carefully. Okay.
Okay. All right.
If I may ask you, Mr. Blair, if you could, I'm not a member of the CRB, so I'll say that. But what I think may be helpful is for you all to know what council would be considering when it comes back before us. That may be helpful for you all now. And things that I'm specifically thinking about, like if this is approved and you all voted on it and we went back to the executive director and auditor position, the structure that we're trying to put in place with the city manager office of deputy city manager of equity, that then would be an equity, the office of equity, CRB office, like those are all factors that we're having to consider in the budgeting period. And so those would still be conversation topics that like I would bring up. So I just think it may be helpful for Mr. Blair to just tell you all what we discussed the last time, what would be discussion points, like the 1% of the police department budget. Those are the type of things that are in here that will probably still be big discussion topics. And then I know the complaints and investigations, I know even the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus is something that they're trying to push through legislative session. So some of the concerns that we had about legality would, if they were able to get that pushed through, we wouldn't even have those same concerns. But Mr. Blair, if you wanna, or could, if the board wants that, or if
I think we got to finish voting.
Mayor,
right?
excuse me, we're still in the middle of a vote. We haven't finished the vote yet on whether we're going to send this back to council, because I haven't been polled for my vote.
Okay,
And I
so,
have no position here, so I wasn't trying. I was
okay.
just trying to give it.
Okay, so I count 5 yeses.
And I think Ms.
Yeah.
Gilmore and Ms. Johnson need to vote still, whether or not they want to.
No, I've already voted. I voted. I said
I'm
yes.
sorry.
She said, yeah.
If I may, it's Ms. Gilmore, Mr. Watson, and Ms. Carpenter.
Oh, well, I'm definitely a yes.
I think Mr. Mendez, didn't you say yes?
Yes.
He
I
said
did
yes
indeed.
also. Yeah. And then Mr.
Reluctant.
Evans, so I think we had, I was counting 5. 5 out of 7.
Hey,
No.
just a quick
Yeah, that's
question.
correct.
Okay, all right.
The only person who has not voted, I think, is Ms. Gilmore. And everyone else who's voted has been yes. And we're missing Miss Allen, who's not here today.
Ms. Allen is actually no longer on the board. She's resigned from the board.
Okay.
I would also like to propose a motion
Okay, concur.
that we also present the proposal to revert to the original bylaws and statute at the next council meeting as required by our current bylaws. Just touching all the bases.
You know, as we're going through this, I think I kind of looked at this as being an introductory session. And I'm leaning more towards what you're saying. Give us a chance to go back and digest all of this. And even if in the end we end up voting, we concur on adopting the original bylaws, I feel like we need to go back, excuse me, and digest a lot of what's, you know, coming at us right now.
Yeah.
And even if that's a week from now, you know, it'll just give us a little bit of time.
Well, the motion passed. My motion passed. So I'm a little confused.
Well, then Ms. Gilmer didn't vote, right? She wanted
There's still majority.
But
Well,
yeah,
that's-
based on majority, you did get you do indeed get the thumbs up based on majority.
But I do
But
agree with Bill.
go ahead.
I would
What's that?
second Bill's motion to add another vote to the agenda next week, or at the next meeting, just so we can, there's no doubt whether or not we complied with the bylaws. So we have this vote, we voted on it. Presumably everyone will vote the same way, or maybe they'll change their mind, and we'll vote next time too, because of the bylaws, the wording of the bylaw. So
Ms. Carpenter's motion is a strong communication to the council and to the city that we think the original bylaws and statute are stronger. My motion is, again, a procedural one, just to make sure that we have the maximum chance of making that happen.
I mean, you know, it's not changing the bylaws is what, I mean, we are, you know, asking the council to adopt the original bylaws. We're not trying to change any, or the bylaws and ordinance. We're not trying to change anything, just to go back to that work that was done, and documents were produced that certainly addressed what the community is feeling and was feeling at that time. So I'm not really changing.
That's a change. That's a change. I'm sorry. I mean, the board, you know, the city council passed, advised, perhaps not, you know, very wisely passed the bylaws and the statute. Those are our bylaws now, and you're proposing to change them. Sorry. So let's touch the bases and make sure we can actually get this done.
So,
All right,
Mr. Chair,
what do you guys feel about having a vote on giving us a week to look at the bylaws, right? We're probably all going to vote in favor of them in a week, but we're sort of getting a better picture of who we are, how we're going to operate at the moment. What do y'all feel about taking a look over the next week, reconvening, and then moving forward with a final vote? It seems like there's a little bit of uncertainty amongst the team. There's no need to rush. I mean, we want change right now. Don't get me wrong. And the bylaws look very, very organized. Lots of hours were put into them. But we're all also getting to understand how we're going to operate, right, as we're moving along. So waiting a week probably isn't going to change the world in a negative way. I think the most positive thing is that we're here now. And, you know, obviously due to the coronavirus and some other things, it took a while for this board to get together. So, you know, we're taking a step in the right direction at the moment. And we got some talented people, a great group of people that I'm really looking forward to getting to know. But I don't think it hurts to, let's go back, let's take a look. Let's go through this meeting. There's some other items. And we can vote again in a week. Or whenever we decide, we've still got to even make a schedule for when we're going to meet. And, you know, how long. And of course, there's other aspects that we've got to figure out as well. So how do you guys feel about that?
Well, if we decide to do that, I'll withdraw my motion.
What's that?
I'll withdraw my motion.
You're gonna withdraw? Okay.
Right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something inside of you that wants to kind of go back and revise, and I respect that. I respect everybody on this call. Okay, I want everybody to have input. I don't think we're recreating the Constitution. There's a lot of information in there. We don't want to recreate the wheel. But if we need a little bit of time, I'm all horse. We can just take the time. I don't know if Nancy likes that, but I don't think we're going to massively recreate what they did in 18 months of hard work a week from now. But I think we'll have sort of a better, again, understanding of how we're moving forward and what we're looking for. And I don't think we need to get caught up too much into that on the very first meeting.
So Nancy's motion, I agree. Nancy's motion passed. So it's theoretically, if the city council chooses to discuss it, it should be before them. But it's, as Mr. Blair explained, it's subject arguably to challenge. It's not technically maybe sufficient in his legal opinion. So I think it's good for us to meet again. We can talk about at the next meeting. We will have the same vote, but we'll have everyone will have more of a chance to look at them if they need that time, and we can discuss it more as a group. And it will just be the members of the CRB talking about it unless someone else asks for time, so it doesn't get too confusing. Then we can pass it in a way that's technically sound too. And it wouldn't be, we would still be looking to adopt the same bylaws and ordinance that Nancy's motion passed. So we wouldn't be adding to or changing it necessarily.
Well, just remember that historically, the initial PCRB went to city council many, many times over the course of 2019, asking them, you know, to adopt these initial bylaws and this initial ordinance, right? That's what was going on quite a bit. And, you know, the council said they would leave it up to us as to which version we wanted and to hold them accountable for supporting this decision, and we operate in whichever version of the bylaws and ordinance that, you know, we adopted. And it looks like we just adopted to operate under the version that the initial PCRB you know, gave to council. And I would hope at the next council meeting that they will go along with that, that they understand that, and that's what we voted to operate under today. And that's, I mean, regardless what the current bylaws say, I'm I have to honor what was said last fall, last spring, last summer. And, while waiting to, sit, even though we were supposed to have our first meeting in March, and then, the pandemic, interrupted that. And the other question is, do we have staff capacity to put together another board meeting in a week? Because that requires the communications office to be able to, devote time to get
I'll
us.
just say that we can amend our own bylaws. There's no question of that. We just need 2 meetings to do it based on the current bylaws. We need the one where we propose it and then the one where we do it. And we can't amend the ordinance, only the city council can. So I think we're on track for both of these. I just think we have to wait one more meeting.
The other thing, the city council doesn't meet for what, another 3 weeks?
July 20th, I think.
Okay, so yeah, even if we are to meet in a week, the city council won't have met yet, right, to look at anything related to PCRB. Even if we meet in 2 weeks, they won't have met yet, right? So that gives us a little bit of time, right, to get some things together. Because even after they do meet, which is 3 weeks from now, then 4 weeks from now, we'll probably meet, or sometime after they have their meeting, and to see what came out of that.
But they've already decided. We're not amending or doing anything. They've already decided at the first meeting we can decide which one of the bylaws we want to be under. And I just, I don't see a reason to wait, because we've got things going on in the city every day that, they want to see how we're going to be trustworthy, how we're going to be transparent, how we're going to collaborate with the police department over our data and things like that, and to kick it down the alley some more just seems to be counterproductive.
I think we fired a shot across the bows. With Mayor Walker here, they know perfectly well what's coming. And, whether, and I think that the sense of the board is very strong. And I think we can take whatever bureaucratic steps are necessary to absolutely 100% for sure get it on the board agenda. And I think we probably we'll need another meeting to hash out what that is.
Yeah, I think I would suggest to Mr. Chairman that we talk about when we might meet next, since that's such a subject of discussion right now. And then also we don't want to forget that I think at least a couple of us want to have public comment.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Okay, I realize I'm a non-voting member and I'm trying to feel my way and see what my role is here. And several of you are intricately knowledgeable of the history here, and that's awesome. What if the original document, which I'm hearing was a really good document, can someone address to me, or would they like to, why there was a second version that appeared to be watered down? Just so I have a little background. Or I can go read the 2 documents and figure it out myself. Anyone
that would probably be the better thing to do.
Okay. Because I have them both here and I've been perusing through them, but okay. So apparently I'm going to see the differences. Thank you.
So one of my questions for the city attorney, when the original bylaws came out and then they were ultimately changed, it appears to me as if the city looked at those bylaws from a legal perspective and then began to reshape the original bylaws. Did the city attorney, did you have some review of those laws and the original bylaws, and what happened from a city perspective with the original legal perspective?
Ultimately, there were some issues that were discussed with council, and council, obviously the initial bylaws and ordinance were a proposal based on conversations with the council. They were presented with a document, both an ordinance and bylaws based on those conversations that they enacted in November of last year.
I'll just note that the city council membership has changed since those were voted. So some of the
Yeah.
concerns that some people who voted for it in November might have had, perhaps those individuals are no longer on the board. I don't know that for sure. But this is a different council. We'll be putting this before if and when we finalize the steps to do so.
And also a different time. So much is going on around the nation now. So that too, that's a major difference now that we're facing. So that too needs to be a part of this conversation. Take that into consideration. So that would make a major, major difference. My hope is that we are not going to sugarcoat or just put a Band-Aid on something just for the sake of saying that we got a CRB now, and just to maybe have people to say that shut people up. Okay, we got them quiet now. We got a CRB with watered down bylaws and all of that. So if we're going to do this, my hopes is that we're going to do it properly and that we're going to make a difference. And if we're going to make that difference, then we're definitely not going to be able to do it or make a change with anything that has been watered down, because it's pointless. So that's where I am with this right now.
Amen. I may make a suggestion that I have no idea what our arrangements are in terms of how long this call can go on and so on. But there is concern among the board members that we would like to have public comments. And if we're going to have half an hour, then we should start now. And so I don't know how the other folks feel about that.
I think we should also talk about scheduling the next meeting too, perhaps before, and then it's just a suggestion, leave whatever time is left to public comment under whatever rules Chairman Watson feels is appropriate.
And also, Mr. Chair, we want to be able to talk about scheduling of the meetings for the year, but we can have that conversation, as we're talking about the job description too. We can talk about that also. Gives you another opportunity to be able to send all your thoughts to either Mr. Mendez or to you yourself to be able to talk about that and get the schedule plan together. But I also will say, in terms of scheduling for the year, that we'll need to come back because I have to worry about our folks in terms of being able to have those meetings scheduled and for you to have the necessary people available so that we can make sure these meetings can be done live and it doesn't conflict with other meetings that we have throughout the city.
Okay, that sounds good. I got a couple other questions. Of course, we're in the coronavirus world. Assuming that we weren't, would we have a physical meeting space allocated within the city?
Yes, sir.
Yes, it would. Yeah, it would be like any other board that we would have to be able to provide you with public access.
Okay. There was we had the information about FOIA. In an ideal world, I would love to be able to get the group together. Obviously that's not easily possible under current conditions, but it would be nice to somehow, I don't know, be in the same space, at least for a couple hours. If we were in the same space, but we didn't talk about the CRB, I mean, anytime there's more than two of us, it has to be a public meeting, correct? Or, everybody, it would have to be broadcast, the city would have to be notified, everything you just said. So there's no opportunity for any team building unless we got together but didn't talk about CRB, right? And it's the coronavirus on top of that, with the limitations that brings. Okay, because you know, ideally, I would just, you know, like to kind of get a feel for everybody and you know, bring everybody together. And so if we were to even do a Zoom, just to like, hey, what do you know, how many kids do you have? You know, what are your hobbies? You know, any of that kind of stuff as a board. We could do that, right? If we were not talking about CRB stuff. Is that true? Because that I think for me, it would be just nice to, you know, be human, right? We're in a time where it's hard to be human.
Like a meet and greet.
Yeah. So if we could
Like
have a
a meet and
social
greet.
Zoom. Yeah, exactly. Or just meet at a park or something at a distance and, hey, how you doing?
You
Because that's going to make us more effective, in my opinion.
You can do that, but I would not call it a CRB team building or anything like that. I'd just say we're going to get together and say hello to each other, introduce ourselves on a personal level, and know CRB business will be discussed or talked about.
Right.
On that note, could I ask, I don't know if this is for Mr. Blair, Mr. Wheeler, someone else. How can we get in touch with each other? Because I don't particularly want to share all my contact information right now when the public's watching or anything, but like, you know, I feel like if we're going to do what Mr. Watson's suggesting, we should probably be able to get in touch with each other.
Yeah, we don't have all of each other's contact information.
So I think the best way would be for Dr. Richardson to just have staff go ahead and create the email addresses and have those sent out, and Ms. Robinson can send out any personal contact information if you all want phone numbers and things like that. If you all agree. So I guess you all would just go around and ask her, did she send the information she has on file out to the other board members?
Can this be done relatively quickly? That way people could share their comments on the job description with me soon?
I'm sorry, I was muted.
Yeah,
yes,
Robinson,
we can.
right?
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think he might have been. Go ahead, sir.
All right, Ms. Robinson will take care of one part of it, and I'll take care of the second part in terms of the emails. We should be able to get that done relatively quickly. And Ms. Robinson's part, I'm sure she can get that done relatively quickly. So.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I would like to open it up for public comment, whether that's sounds like that comes in the chat window, if I'm understanding correctly.
Mr. Watson, typically what we do is we invite the public who is attending the meeting. You have about 44 people attending right now. We invite them to raise their hands, and then I would call on them in order, and you can determine how much time you want to give them. Typically, we do 3 minutes. And we do have people.
So I've seen the many city council meetings that go deep into the night. So I'm kind of wondering, how many people do you have on deck that appear to have their hand raised? I know sometimes hands, it's a domino effect, right? Somebody says something and then you say, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then they raise their hand. Do you have an idea for how many we have on deck right now?
Currently, we have 5. Okay,
well, I would say we can give them 5 minutes. If that's good with the group. Moving forward, we think we're going to talk about it, but we'd want to stick with 3. But if we only have 5 people, then I think 5 minutes is good. I've seen many people get cut off in city council meetings when they had more to say.
Great. I'll start a timer at 5 minutes. And the first person who has raised their hand is Walt Heineke. And Walt, you are on with the CRB. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, members of the CRB. I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking this on. I know it's going to be a lot of work, and it's a huge community service, especially as Rennie just said, under these new circumstances that we're facing. We're going to need increased, improved complaint processes and increased and improved community oversight processes to get this right. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for your service and for taking this on. I also wanted to just be clear, today you did what the city council has asked you to do. Like, it's been clear that the community has been coming to the council for several months now, asking to revert back to the original ordinance and bylaws. The city council has repeatedly said they would leave that decision to you. Today, you passed a resolution to ask the city council to reconsider and revert back to the original ordinance and the original bylaws. You can't change the ordinance, only city council can change the ordinance. You can change the bylaws, and I'm happy to see that you're going to address that next meeting as well. But what you've done now is you've sent a resolution to council asking what many community members have asked for, which is to revert back to the original ordinance and bylaws passed by the original initial PCRB. And I don't know what the mechanism is, but I think you'll need to figure out how that passed resolution from today is communicated to council immediately. So thank you very much. And just know that the community is going to be here and behind you and going to be supporting you at every step of the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Walt.
Thank you, Walt.
Yeah.
Yeah, unmute. We have 3 additional people that have raised their hands. If you want to speak to the PCRB, you can click the raise hand icon. If you're on via telephone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. Next up is Elizabeth Stark. Elizabeth, you're on with the PCRB and you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth. I live in the city of Charlottesville. And first off, I just want to thank you all for your service, for caring about our community and willing to step up and take this bold action of being on the PCRB. Your work is incredibly important and the community is watching and supporting you. I also want to second what Ms. Johnson said, noting that things have changed since November. People are in the streets demanding that we reform policing. And I think that a robust PCRB is an excellent place to start. So I really appreciate you recognizing the importance of oversight and knowing that an effective PCRB cannot be, it cannot make a difference in our community if it has a watered down ordinance and bylaws. So thank you again for your work. We'll be watching and we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Watson, next up is Harold Foley. Harold, you're on with the PCRB and you have 5 minutes. Harold, can you unmute your microphone?
Can everyone hear me now?
We can hear you now.
So I'm gonna be short. I'm gonna be short. I'm gonna thank everyone who took the courage to apply for this position, to be on this board, and I'm really excited about the direction that the PCRB is going now. And we been fighting for almost a year and so to make sure they have strong bylaws and audience. And so I want to thank y'all so much for taking that on. That's all I had to say, and we definitely will be watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harold.
Okay, next up is Sarah Burke. Sarah, you're on with the PCRB. You have 5 minutes.
Great. I'll presume everybody can hear me unless I get a big shaking of heads. So my name is Sarah Burke. I was one of the initial CRB members that worked on both the research and the drafting of the ordinance and the bylaws, including a significant amount of community engagement to determine what our community of Charlottesville specifically was asking for. And in that, we did a fair amount of training and consult with the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. And their main point of sort of best practices is that there really are no two CRBs that are alike. So they are each crafted by the citizenry and all stakeholders, and also particularized to the community's needs. And so what we created and presented back in November of last year was what we thought was the most comprehensive way that we could build community oversight of policing, and not just reviewing of complaints against officers, but also looking at data of possibly discriminatory practices, the who is stopped and why, looking at arrest data, looking at use of force beyond something that is a civilian originated complaint about a specific officer, and a fair amount of community engagement mandated to be inclusionary of the police department, so that the police department is a part of the process to both listening to the community needs, but also engaging with the civilian oversight body. And after we made our presentation, our terms ended, and they weren't extended despite the fact that we requested them to be extended. And one of the questions I think that Mr. C asked, or maybe some other folks asked this question as well, was, how did we get to this watered down version? And I think the city is the only one who can actually answer that. But I can tell you that we were not bored any longer when the new ordinance and bylaws were created. And if you're trying to look at the two documents and see the meaningful differences, it's actually quite hard to do. And part of that reason is because we were really careful in the way that we crafted it, and careful to ensure that we were following the fairly kind of complicated legal situation of being a CRB in Virginia, which is a Dillon Rule state. And there are also certain protections afforded to law enforcement officers during a disciplinary hearing or grievance hearing. So, since the city watered down the version that we presented, there have been statements made publicly that our proposal was illegal, and that's the reason why why they didn't adopt it. And I will just say that those weren't concerns that we heard at the time, and I don't know that that's that's everybody's legal opinion who's a lawyer practicing in Virginia, and I feel like that's become sort of a cop-out to the reasons why they watered down the ordinance. And I'll just say that back in February of this year, we were still pushing for the issue of, even though we weren't on the board, of returning back to the initial bylaws and ordinance. And we wrote a 6-page letter to City Council from the initial CRB and from the People's Coalition, stating all of the major differences between the current version and the version that we had proposed. So I'm happy to send that along so that everybody can have a sense of it, because when you compare the two documents, you're not really comparing apples to apples, you're comparing apples to oranges. And the current version does not include the police department in the community engagement. It also doesn't include the board in a lot of meaningful decisions. The city's version is very focused on the executive director having a fair amount of authority. And that person is, of course, hired by the city manager. And there is input by the board, but our concern is that takes a lot of power away from you as a board and from the community and the voices that you all are promising to listen to. So I can send you that that letter, but I think the main issues are the role of the executive director is really expanded in their model. There are a significant number of things that the board had access to or would have been able to review that now they are not able to do, you are not able to do. I'm just looking at this right now. There's no obvious statement of having access to any raw data. So as it stands now, you have as much information as the public, which isn't much. And there are some sort of smaller issues that I won't necessarily get into here. But I'm happy to talk about it with anybody who's interested in learning a little bit more about what our process was and how we came to the conclusions that we came to. And I really want to thank you all because it's hard work. And that's it.
Thank you, Sarah. You did hard work too. And I remember I think one of our issues that has been bandied about among the members of this current board is to get you and the members of the old board to come to at least one of our meetings. And I think we need to get that on our agenda.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do I don't know if I'm still on, but we'd be happy to do, sort of a presentation that's a little bit more comprehensive and that gives more than 5 minutes and more than just my one voice, which is one small voice amongst a large group of people. But I'd be happy to do that. If you want to schedule that with me and put it on your agenda, we can do that as soon as you all need.
Thank you, Sarah. I'd love to see it next time at our next meeting.
Sure thing, Nancy.
Yeah, that was very priceless. Lots of good information. Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Make sure to send a copy of that letter.
Mr. Watson, next up is Jeffrey Fogel. Jeffrey, you're on with the PCRB. You have 5 minutes. Mr. Fogel?
Can you hear me?
We can now. Go ahead.
Good. I just want to highlight the fact that the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus is going to be proposing in the August session that the governor has called a mandate for civilian review boards that's going to go far beyond what either of these bylaws has presented to you. And it's going to include the right to subpoena witnesses, to subpoena documents, and putting the ultimate authority for the discipline and removal of officers who engage in misconduct in the hands where it belongs, the people, which means you all. So I'm hoping that you all, that's about the extent of it, but take a look yourself. And I'm hoping that you all as a body would communicate with the Legislative Black Caucus to tell them that you support their proposal and to explain to them why. Because what's been given to you, perhaps due to the law, but is inadequate to the job that's been presented. And that the caucus has the real solution to what a civilian review board should look like. So I would urge you to look at that together and to communicate with them, certainly long before the August session. Thank you.
I'm sure the fraternal order
Thank
of
you.
police-
Thank you.
I'm sure there will be no one lobbying against that.
Mr. Watson, we have 2 other hands raised. Next up is Rosia Parker. Rosia, you're on with the PCRB. You've got 5 minutes.
Hello, I want to say thank you. Thank y'all for, taking this time out of, your daily life and actually seeing what it is that other people are really seeing dealing with the community and policing. It's really been a hard work for me because this has been personal because of the things that, because when a community member that has been out there doing the work and the things that I spoke about to be pushed back against personally and for city council and for the police chief and some of the police department to take things out of professionalism. I just pray and hope that as a board that those of y'all that stand strong, that doesn't happen to you. But I just want to say thank you for taking the time out to do this hard work because this was very hard for a lot of us. Some of us coming from experience and some of us not coming from experience. But I wasn't only speaking for myself, but I was speaking for my community because these are the things that I've seen. But also we need to really push not only for for the police to be, they need to be trained. We definitely need to, because I know a lot of people is going to be asking for defunding the police or abolishing it, but it's some things that they need to be trained for, that the CRB needs to make sure that these people, that the police are and understanding of the transparency of training to be able to police the community. It might be to the point where we don't need the police to police our community, that we can do it as our own community, especially in the Black and brown community, because we are so over policed. And the more that we continue to say that we're over policed, it seems like it's a problem. But the police sit here and they watch exactly the things that are taking place in our low income communities, instead of going after the people that are breaking these laws or whatever the situation is, and just sitting there watching. It's not that me as a community leader and activist, it's not that I'm against all police officers. I'm just against the bad police officers. Just like they say all white people and all Black people aren't the same, we aren't. We would just like to have equity, being equal, to be treated as such, to be treated as human beings, to be treated as people, and not be treated in disrespect because of the color of our skin. I know everything hasn't always been the brightest, but I feel that if we're all on one accord trying to make a community, make our community matter, I think we should all be able to work together, city council, police department, community members, regardless of what activists have done to come out to make light of whatever's being done in the community that is being not looked at, that the people are continuing to do what they're doing. Not all community activists are acting the same way. So I don't want that to be a main part of when it comes to the community, that everything is continuously to be pushed personally, because you have to, this is bigger than us. There's nothing for it to be personal. And if you're taking it personal, I think you need to get out of those positions that you're in if you're going to continue to take it personal. I think you need to take it as being human and understand what other humans are going through. And again, I say thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. That was another member of the original board, in case people don't know it.
Mr. Watson, our next speaker is Kate Fraley. Kate, you're on with the PCRB. You've got 5 minutes.
Hi, I'll make it short. I just want to draw your attention to the binder that you received. In tab number 4 of the binder you received is that February 7th letter from the previous CRB and the People's Coalition. Also under tab number 3 in that binder is a red line of the documents that also show very energetically the things that are missing, but the initial CRB bylaws and ordinance are a cultural sort of difference, not just the words. And that's why the People's Coalition wants to go back to the original, because the editing is just not easy to do or able to do. But those two sections, number 3 and number 4, have those explanations of why they're different or how they're different and what the problems are. Thank you. Thank you all for doing this.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Watson, we have another hand raised. Rory Stolzenberger, you're on with the PCRB. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Brian, and welcome to being the CRB to the board. I just wanted to quickly bring your attention to this communications campaign on the part of the police over the last week or so. And it's difficult really not to call it a propaganda campaign. From their initial volleys on social media, broadcasting these messages of positive support from the community that I've now been informed by the police just a moment ago are actually class 1 misdemeanors, equivalent to what the people who spray painted in the street have been charged with, but that the police welcomed in being posted on and in the police department signs like Blue Lives Matter. That to their extremely overblown press release and live stream on Thursday, in which they called lawful speech protest directed at diners inside downtown mall restaurants, which, while distasteful, is entirely constitutionally protected speech, and they called it, quote, unacceptable and criminal behavior. Now, I know that the board has in its purview the ability to broadly review what the police department is up to, and I ask you to consider, is it appropriate for the police to be running this messaging campaign it's in its own defense against protests that call for defunding or abolishing or just criticizing the police. Now, it might be like within their rights as the government to express a viewpoint as they choose, but as citizens and you as the Civilian Review Board, I think need to wonder and to ask, is it appropriate for the police department to be expressing these views, or do we want them to see themselves and for the public to see them as neutral arbiters of justice? Thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Watson, there are no other hands raised at this time.
Okay, thank you. Lots of great comments. I learned a lot. I look forward to getting some more information from Sarah about the history. That was very informative. I'm also looking forward to organizing some type of ability to meet everybody on this committee. I thank everybody for being a part of this. This is a very significant issue, to say the least. I noticed that the police chief is now on. If you'd like to say a couple words, that'd be great. I don't know if we've ever met each other before. I've been seeing you in the media and on TV. And thank you for your service. And, Charlottesville has become a very interesting place over the last 5 years. I mean, it's always been a lot going on with the community and the police, but I feel like it's definitely intensified. But Chief Brackney, if you have any words, I'd like to pass the mic over to you.
Thank you. I was just unmuting and taking notes more than anything. I'm here to just listen, like everyone else, to see what the interests of the board are and how we could all move forward. So thank you for allowing that opportunity and for staying on schedule. I do have a 3 o'clock, and I think a few other folks that do as well. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. This is a question for Mr. Richardson. Do we need to provide sort of a rough-in schedule now, or can our team meet and then determine what the schedule is going to look like? I'm not sure about that.
I think that would be good because I know we probably wouldn't be able to get it established today since we're just meeting. But I would, ask that we're able to schedule a next meeting between the board.
Okay, and then if in my humble opinion, if Miss Robinson could send us everybody's email address and phone numbers, that would be great, because we really haven't talked to each other. A lot of folks I've seen really fighting hard at City Council, like Ms. Carpenter, I've seen for a long time. I've seen through social media and on TV, but we really haven't all met each other yet. So that's a critical piece for me. Yeah.
Sure. As soon as IT has created your city email addresses, I'll forward them on.
Mr. Chairperson, may I say something? Just real quickly about a meeting. I'd like to hope we can do an evening meeting, because I'd like to get as many community members as possible on these webinar or on these Zooms until we can actually maybe meet at the pavilion sometime, depending on how this pandemic and public health emergency plays out over the course of the summer. It'd be nice to have a widely spaced meeting there. But when I get that email, I'll share more about the times.
I think you're muted, Mr. Watson, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yeah, I like that idea. I was listening in on the last City Council via Zoom, and one of the big issues is everybody doesn't have internet, everybody doesn't have a computer. So I was thinking that exact thing, that, you know, maybe the pavilion downtown might give an opportunity for some of the public who doesn't have internet access, phone access. We have plenty of space, you know, maybe we can look at having a meeting in that venue. I don't know if that has to be approved by the city. I hadn't thought about it too deeply, but that is one concern right now, right? While we're in COVID-19, that not everybody from the public has, you know, a smartphone or an iPad. So definitely something to consider.
Could I ask, Mr. Chairman, is the plan then for us to schedule something once we get these city email addresses? Or are we going to try to schedule something now for the second meeting?
Yeah, you know, so that I've worked for government, and it seems like government IT tends to move slow. So I'm a little worried about waiting to get an email.
Mr. Watson,
Yes,
Watson, we'll get it taken care of.
You get it pretty quickly, sir?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I've worked with the Department of Defense, and the email account, it'd take a month. But yeah, if we can get those, and they'll probably have an Outlook calendar. We can collaborate on the time. I've got kids, so you know, evenings. Well, I guess there's going to be a next meeting, and I don't know that that necessarily has to be the same time as all future meetings. Because I guess we need to discuss when the future meetings are going to be, right? The actual cadence of the official monthly meeting. But we kind of just need a meeting, you know, just to initially get to know each other. But maybe that, okay, so maybe that one will be, how do people feel about the next one being sort of not an official CRB meeting? Or does that?
I would suggest that we schedule that one on our own, not right now, but if possible, try to schedule a second meeting, official meeting right now, since we have
get it on the, okay, get that on the docket. Okay.
If possible, just sometime next week or the week after, and then we can decide if it's going to be twice a month or.
Okay.
I know that we have to come up with a schedule, but there's nothing that says it's once a month, twice a month, or anything. We can decide how much we'd like to meet.
What does next Tuesday at 5 o'clock look like for the group? Tuesday, the 7th of July.
And I'll just, if I can, just.
Yes,
ma'am. So, and I think it's important for you all to have the bylaw discussion, but council has limited like the number of meetings that boards can have just because of what it puts on the communications team and trying to make sure that process happens. So I'm just requesting that Mr. Wheeler is just included in this conversation to make sure that his team has the space to set up and moderate and the meetings.
Mr. Wheeler, should we give you multiple, you know, date and times and then see what your availability looks like?
I think I would go ahead and have the group pick a preferred date, and we will schedule staff around that. As to the idea of meeting in another venue, just to discuss that a little bit, what council has given us guidance on is to have virtual meetings only at this point. And one of the challenges, if you move into a physical environment, is allowing us to broadcast that meeting to a virtual audience. So if the expectation is City Hall is still closed, even though I understand, you know, the pavilion being an outdoor facility, there would still be some difficulty. That's a private facility. We would need to get their permission, but it would also be a challenge to, you know, film and share and have everyone on mic and on camera, where with Zoom in a virtual way, that is much more straightforward.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's probably something that you guys in the city are generally looking at alternatives. So maybe we'll see what happens as the COVID-19, you know, lifestyle evolves, you know, what you guys do. You might even, I don't know, I was just thinking, put a screen up or something on downtown or somewhere where people can sit outside, and maybe there's somebody that can facilitate some capability for the people to comment. So maybe even if we're at our homes, there could be a place that's accessible by public transit where it's broadcast on a screen. I mean, just an idea, but I'm sure since this isn't really going to go away anytime soon, that you guys will figure something out down the road.
Next Tuesday at 7 works for me, or next Tuesday at 5 works for me.
Okay, Tuesday at 5. Is that okay with the majority of the group?
It doesn't work for me, but I sent you a chat.
Okay.
Tuesday 5 works for me.
If you don't mind my chewing on a sandwich or something, that's no problem.
Okay. Do we need to provide you an alternative time as a backup just in case, Brian, or is that sufficient?
That is sufficient for me. I'm good.
Okay, so, all right. Well, if there's no major objections, then we'll go with Tuesday of next week, which is, I just say July 8th?
7th.
July 7th, 5 o'clock. And then Brian, you send out all the Zoom invite and all that information.
We will definitely do that. Yes.
Okay.
And I presume that we'll want to share with Jim our ideas for the agenda.
That would be great. It sounds like we're going to get emails pretty quickly. So I'm trying to think the best way to kind of work that, because it's almost like we're having a meeting, but there's meeting types of things that are happening that are leading to that meeting. But email, and I'm thinking about the FOIA piece, right? And the inability to talk with more than, yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
How long do you anticipate meeting next Tuesday?
Just offhand, I would say 2 hours.
Okay.
How do people feel about that?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
I can be with you the first 45.
Well,
Then I
we'll be
lucky.
lucky.
Okay.
Well, let me ask you another thing. If you have to, I personally, if you have to log out of your Zoom, but you want to listen in,
I won't be available because I have appointments.
Roger that. Okay, sounds good.
So I'll catch up with you. I mean, you guys will, I'm sure, get me all the information. Just want to give you a heads up.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to suggest that maybe you and I, as reluctant officers now, or unexpected officers, touch base with Mr. Wheeler and Ms. Robinson about the mechanics of setting up an agenda, what they typically do and stuff. So then it's just the two of us and we don't implicate any public meeting requirement.
That sounds great. Yeah, we're gonna be
I hate
drinking
to interrupt your team.
Yes,
best of luck with the scheduling. I'm already past my 3 o'clock. Thank you for at least inviting me. I do appreciate that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Okay, yeah, Stuart. Yeah, you and I will connect. Oh,
If I can just share two things. So council canceled its June meeting for us to get a break. That's still another week in between our meeting, and we were trying to give our staff the same time period to break. And there can't be a meeting without staff present. Ms. Robinson is the deputy clerk, and she will be the liaison for the city and making sure that everything is set up. Mr. Wheeler and his team will have to be here. I know I've seen some other city council members on just viewing. So if it's not too much to ask, if you all can just shift it to the next week, but we will make it work if the 7th is the only option.
Well,
how do you guys feel?
A lot of time before the next city council meeting. Then if we're going out to the 14th, it would only give us 6 days. Just pointing that out.
What about that, Mayor Walker? What about later in that same week? So later next week, or is it just next week is just bad altogether?
I think I would say we would prefer But again, this is something that we don't want anyone to think that we're not committed to, because we are. And we will make ourselves available, but we were not planning to add to our schedule.
When is the next city council meeting? The actual date?
20th.
The 20th.
20th. Just doing some thinking here and looking at the schedule.
Yeah, so if we want to have, submit materials to the council, we kind of have to meet next week.
Okay, well,
Isn't that agenda full?
what's that?
Isn't that agenda full, the next council meeting? I mean, are they going to have time to?
Oh, that's a good
deal with
point.
it? And Mr. Chairman, in all due respect, thank you so much. I need to go to my 3:15 meeting, so I'll catch you guys a little bit later. Thank you all. Pleasure meeting you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're slated to meet then. Sounds like next Tuesday, 5 o'clock, July 7th. Okay.
Okay.
Well, are there any additional questions, comments, ideas? If there are no more questions, comments, ideas, confusion, any of that good stuff, we can call this. If I have the authority, I will call this meeting adjourned.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a good
Look
evening.
forward to meeting everybody.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.